Howdy, guys, and welcome into the TexAgs Rewind. I'm Kaylee Dreyer,
I'm Kaylin Cruzy.
and today on the show we had Luke Evangelist, John Harris, Recruiting Country, and Kendall Rogers. What was your favorite part?
My favorite part was Kendall Rogers. What was your favorite part?
And I'd say my favorite part was John Harris. I'm excited for the draft tomorrow. And the Rewind is presented by Specs, and we are in the Rollo Insurance Studio. Check it out.
Yeah, and this is a guy that Bucky's wanted for a while. So Duke Miles beat Bucky McMillan's last high school basketball team at, I believe, it was in the state championship, heavily underdog team. Duke Miles, they led a 9-point comeback in the second half to send Bucky McMillan packing, essentially, in high school. He takes the Samford job. Duke Miles is one of the first players he offers. They end up being in his top three with Troy and North Alabama. He ends up picking Troy over Samford. So when he enters the portal in 2023 out of Troy, Bucky wants him again, can't get him to Samford. He ends up going to High Point for a year, plays for Allen Huss. Then he goes to Oklahoma, and now Bucky McMillan is the head coach at Texas A&M and finally gets Duke Miles, a player that he's wanted multiple times before. And it's clear that he believes he would be a great fit in this system if he's tried to recruit him at every level so far. So to me, this is a guy that was Oklahoma's third leading scorer behind Jeremiah Fears, who might be a lottery pick, and Jalen Moore, who's another very solid player who has a professional future. And Duke Miles slots in as one of your starters in the backcourt day one with the production that he had at Oklahoma, the way he shoots the three at 43%. It's just everything Bucky is looking for.
Remind me,
player.
and I know Obi's got a question for you. Remind me, Oklahoma scoring as a team. What did they average or ballpark? Are they like in the 80s or?
They were.
They weren't considered an offensive juggernaut, though,
yeah,
right?
but like the offense wasn't their issue. It was typically their defense.
Their defense. Okay. The reason I'm saying all that is if he was the third option at Oklahoma, averaging just under 10, in my mind, I feel Bucky Ball is going to be a more offensive approach to that.
Yeah.
So we could see 12, 13 points. I guess I'm just trying to forecast.
Absolutely, yeah. Anytime you're playing in a system that was 13th offensively in the country in offense at Samford with Samford talent in the SoCon, you have to think that's going to play well in the SEC with the level of talent that they're pulling in the portal right now, the level of talent that's still out there that they're trying to pull in.
I think he's probably more late first, early second. To be honest, I think people are still having questions about that whole production thing, like trying to match up. Like, man, he's a really impressive athlete, but God, what about the production? I think people worry about that. And I think on that side of it, people are like, look, if you don't produce in college, how in the hell are you going to produce in the NFL? But I think it's really hard to turn away from an athlete of that caliber. And I don't totally buy into that lack of production. I mean, yeah, he didn't have a ton of sacks, but I do think that he was very productive, very disruptive. And I think that's going to matter. I think Green Bay would actually be a good spot for him. Green Bay really doesn't have a lot on the edges. They've got Rashawn Gary at one spot. Lucas Van Ness has done nothing. And it's funny because Texans fans didn't want to trade up for Will Anderson because they wanted to sit at number 12 and take Lucas Van Ness to go with CJ Stroud. I'm glad the Texans did what they did. But I think Shamar actually goes in and starts day one in Green Bay, if I'm being honest. Unless the Packers went out and made some kind of deal for Trey Hendrickson or something like that, which I don't quite see at this point. But I think Green Bay would actually be a really nice spot, if I'm being honest, for him. I think Detroit is also a spot to keep in mind. You've got an Aggie leading that organization. So you would imagine Dan Campbell's going to have some info on Shamar that he's going to like. Aiden Hutchinson needs somebody on the other side. Look, when Aiden Hutchinson went down, the Lions didn't struggle at that point, but you could see it took its toll that they couldn't get to the quarterback. And so I could see the Lions looking at Shamar Stewart for sure. So to me, it's more kind of from that kind of 21, 22, the Packers are at 23, on into the early second round where I think Shamar's going to fall.
Talking to John Harris here.
I shouldn't say fall. I shouldn't say fall. Fall sounds bad. I mean, that's where I think he's going to land. I think that's probably a good spot for him too. Sorry about that.
And then Scorden and Turner?
I think Scorden goes in the early to mid-second. I think with Nick, I think there was so much talk about him going into the year, and I think he can be disruptive, but I think I wanted to see a little bit more at the pass game. I think he's going to set a really good edge, and I think he's going to end up being I think he's going to be a four-down front, heavy end that provides some in the run game. I don't know that it's as dynamic as what Shamar can bring, and so I think that probably puts him the beginning of the second to middle second. So I think it's going to be a Friday night for him.
Victor Singleton, the cornerback, the 2026. Let's start with him.
Yeah, the 11th commitment in the 26 class, 6 foot, 165, 170 pounds. He's part of one of the top defenses in the state of Ohio. They were Division III state finalists this last year at Central Catholic, and they were 2-time state champion. He was named co-defensive player of the year in the state. 4 interceptions, really sticky cornerback prospect, long, lean, twitchy. He's got tremendous hips and change of direction. And you see him come up when he sees that ball, he breaks and it's game on, man. He's going for the pick. He's going for the steal. So but he flipped from Illinois. But this is a guy that A&M's been on for a while. They made us top 5 in January with Illinois, Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon, and he visited a couple times this spring. So I think he was at one of the first practices in March, and then of course this last weekend he was back in town, and he brings a lot to the table. I want to say Bronny did a good job comparing him to TK Norman. Very similar athletic background and build, like Norman. Victor Singleton is a jumper on the track. He's a long jump champion, claimed the state title with a 23 last spring. So he brings that multi-sport competitiveness to the table that you love to see when you're putting a guy out there on an island at cornerback.
It's going to be crazy. We knew it was going to be crazy regardless, right? But now I feel like there's the added element to where, like, we all were projecting what it could look like months ago, right? When Schloss left, hey, you're going to have a really good Texas team and maybe the number 1 team in the country in Texas A&M taking on their former coach. And it was already going to be crazy. Throw in the fact that Texas is now number 1. Throw in that A&M was already considered done for the season. There's no way they're going to make the tournament. And now they are amongst the hottest teams in baseball. Just talk about the craziness of this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this would literally be the case, but, to some extent, you got to feel like, Shaw's probably looked back at, about the midseason mark and, not doubting thinking too much about A&M right now because his team's having a great season. But, if you're looking ahead at the schedule, obviously, whether you're A&M or whether you're early or whether you're Jim, like you're looking forward to the A&M Texas series, but in a way it's kind of like, here we go. And I think if you're Jim and that staff, if you would have looked at A&M at the midseason mark, you're like, okay, like those guys are going to come here. They're going to be scuffling. They're going to be doubting themselves. Like, okay, that's about the best case scenario we can think of. Now it's kind of like the worst case scenario you could think of if for those guys, because you've got A&M rolling there with a full head of steam, and Jared Spencer, unfortunately, I mean, I've loved the job that he's done in the Friday spot for UT this year. He's out for the weekend, probably out for the year for them. Which would be a pretty tough blow. But, I mean, you're going to a weekend without your Friday starter. You're having to reshuffle your whole pitching staff. Meanwhile, A&M thinks they're back to kind of being that number 1 national championship type of team. And that's a scary combo. So I just think you look at all those different variables going into the weekend. Obviously, I would think A&M would have a pretty significant crowd over in Austin. I think a lot of people bought tickets earlier in the year. It's going to be a lot of fun. It is good as it gets for a regular season college baseball series. And here's the other thing. We don't even talk about this because of the Schloss element, but this is the first series that A&M and Texas have played as members of the Southeastern Conference, and the first series they've played since A&M left the Big 12. And we're not even really talking about that because of the Schloss element.
How much?
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.